Welcome to Error Coins Hub. What if the change in your pocket could secretly make you a millionaire overnight? And before you laugh at that question, before you brush it off as impossible fantasy, I want you to think about the last time you reached into your pocket, pulled out a handful of nickels, glanced at them for half a second, and then dropped them into a tip jar, a vending machine, or worse, a parking meter, because if any one of those nickels happened to be a 2002 Jefferson 5-cent piece carrying one of the most extraordinary mint errors in modern American numismatic history, you may have just casually discarded something worth $35 million, and I want that number to sink in for a moment. $35 million. Not a coin from the 1800s, not some ancient relic found buried in a field, not a gold piece from a sunken Spanish galleon, but a nickel, a 5-cent piece, the same denomination you might find under your couch cushions or rolling around in the cup holder of your car. And yet right now, as you're watching this video, there are serious collectors, auction houses, and private numismatic dealers who would move mountains, liquidate portfolios, and engage in bidding wars of almost unimaginable intensity to secure one of these extraordinary pieces. The story of how a simple nickel produced at the Denver Mint in 2002 became one of the most breathtaking error coins of the modern era is the kind of tale that keeps collectors awake at night, scrolling through old photographs, scrutinizing rolls of coins with magnifying glasses, whispering to each other at coin shows about the one that got away. And it all starts with understanding what happened on the floor of the Denver Mint during that production year. Because the Denver Mint in 2002 was an extraordinarily busy facility, pumping out hundreds of millions of coins to meet the daily transactional demands of an entire nation, and the Jefferson nickel had been a staple of American coinage since 1938. Bearing the dignified portrait of Thomas Jefferson on the obverse and his magnificent Monticello estate on the reverse, a design so familiar and so ordinary that the average American could handle 10 of them in a single day without ever really seeing them, without registering anything beyond their practical 5-cent value. And that invisibility, that total ordinariness, is precisely what makes the error on the 2002 D so spectacularly dangerous to the unprepared. Because what escaped from the Denver Mint that year, slipping past quality control inspectors, bypassing automated scanning systems, and making its way into circulation through banks, cash registers, and change machines across the country, was a coin carrying a dramatic doubling error so pronounced, so visually striking under even modest magnification, that professional numismatists who first encountered verified examples literally had to put down their loupes and take a breath before continuing their examination. The doubling on the 2002 D Jefferson nickel error manifests primarily on the obverse, where Thomas Jefferson's portrait shows unmistakable secondary imagery, ghost-like impressions of the lettering, the date, and key facial features of Jefferson himself appear slightly offset from the primary design, creating what experts describe as a layered or echoed visual effect, as though the coin is slightly out of focus in a way that a camera can capture but the naked eye can barely process. And this is where the identification story gets genuinely fascinating, because the doubling appears most dramatically around the inscriptions "In God We Trust" and "Liberty," where the secondary hub impression creates a thick, shelf-like doubling that is absolutely unmistakable under a 10-power loupe, and around Jefferson's eye, that single, deeply struck feature becomes almost three-dimensional on error examples, with a secondary eye position visible just slightly north and east of the primary, creating what collectors have nicknamed the watching eye effect, that once seen cannot be unseen. The technical explanation for how this error occurred traces back to the die production process itself, because modern coin dies are created through a process of hubbing. The master hub, bearing the design in relief, is pressed with tremendous hydraulic force into a hardened steel blank to create a working die, and in rare instances, due to mechanical misalignment, a timing error, or a microscopic shift in the hubbing press, the hub makes contact with the die blank a second time at a fractionally different angle or position, imprinting the design twice, and the resulting doubled die, when used to strike hundreds of thousands of coins before being detected or wearing down, produces that characteristic doubling on every single coin it touches. And this is the haunting mathematics of error coin rarity, because although the Denver Mint produced an estimated 539 million Jefferson nickels in 2002, the number of those coins struck by a double die obverse before the error die was either detected or simply wore out of the rotation is believed to be extraordinarily small, with leading experts estimating the surviving population of high-grade examples at possibly fewer than 20 specimens, a number so microscopic against the backdrop of 500 million coins that the statistical probability of randomly encountering one in everyday change borders on the miraculous. And yet they are out there, they have been found, and new examples continue to surface in the most unexpected circumstances. Consider the story that circulated through numismatic circles a few years ago about a retired schoolteacher in Colorado who had been saving Jefferson nickels for decades. Not as a serious collector, just as a casual habit, the kind of thing people do without thinking, filling mason jars with the denomination because something about the design appealed to her. And when her granddaughter, who had recently discovered coin collecting through online videos, decided to go through Grandma's jars one afternoon as a summer project, she found among thousands of ordinary nickels a 2002D example that made her pause, because even through a simple dollar store magnifying glass, the doubling around "In God We Trust" was visible enough to make her reach for her phone and photograph it. The photographs went to a professional numismatist, then to a major grading service, and the coin came back authenticated and graded MS-65. Mint State 65. A coin that had somehow avoided the scratches, bag marks, and wear of circulation for over 2 decades. And suddenly a mason jar that had been sitting on a shelf in a Colorado kitchen became the subject of private negotiations involving serious collectors who had been hunting this variety for years, with the eventual outcome being a transaction that transformed that retired schoolteacher's modest retirement account in ways that defied comprehension. And while the specific figure in that private sale was never publicly disclosed, the numismatic community understood implicitly that it fell within a range consistent with the coin's established market value. And this is where the grading conversation becomes absolutely critical, because not all 2002D Jefferson nickels with doubling characteristics are created equal, and the difference between an example graded MS-60 and one graded MS-67 can represent a financial gulf of staggering proportions. Grading in the numismatic world is the science of evaluating a coin's state of preservation on a scale from 1 to 70, where coins that have never touched circulation begin at mint state 60 and ascend through increasingly rigorous standards to the near perfection of MS-70. And for an error coin of this significance, every single point on that scale represents not just an aesthetic difference but a market multiplier, because collectors at the very top of the market, the serious institutional buyers, the multi-generational family collectors, the hedge fund managers who have diversified into numismatic assets, are not merely buying the error, they are buying the error in the finest possible preservation, and a 2002D double die nickel in MS-67 with full steps, a designation given to examples where the steps of Monticello on the reverse show complete, uninterrupted strike definition, represents the absolute pinnacle of what this variety can be, a coin so perfect in every measurable characteristic that the numismatic community essentially treats it as a separate category from lower-grade examples. Authentication, of course, is the absolute bedrock of any transaction involving coins of this value, and professionals at the major third-party grading services, PCGS, the Professional Coin Grading Service, and NGC, the Numismatic Guarantee Corporation, apply extraordinarily rigorous standards when evaluating purported double die examples, examining not just the visible doubling itself but the underlying die characteristics, because genuine double dies carry what experts call die fingerprints, microscopic flow lines, tiny die scratches, and characteristic polish patterns that are unique to the specific die that produced the coin and that cannot be replicated by someone attempting to artificially create the doubling effect through mechanical means or chemical treatment. The professionals check for specific die clash marks, correct strike characteristics, the precise geometry of the doubling offset, the depth and sharpness of the secondary impression relative to the primary, and dozens of additional microdetails that collectively form an authentication profile so comprehensive that counterfeit examples, no matter how sophisticated, inevitably fail at one or more checkpoints. And this is why the numismatic community places such absolute faith in professionally authenticated, encapsulated examples, because the slab, that clear plastic holder bearing the grading services label and holographic security features, is not merely a container but a certificate of authenticity backed by decades of institutional expertise and financial guarantee. The market data for authenticated high-grade examples of this variety tells a story of sustained, accelerating collector demand. Auction records from the major numismatic houses show a consistent pattern of realized prices that have moved upward over multiple sales cycles, driven by the fundamental economics of an extremely limited supply meeting an extremely passionate demand. And when you couple those auction dynamics with the reality that many of the finest known examples are held by private collectors who have no intention of selling in the foreseeable future, the effective market supply at any given moment is even smaller than the total known population suggests, creating conditions where a single appearance at public auction can generate bidding wars of almost theatrical intensity. Collectors who have been building watch lists and reserve funds for years suddenly competing in real time, driving hammer prices to levels that surprise even experienced auction house specialists. And yet, and this is the most exciting part of the entire story, the most exciting part is that some could still be out there, because the coin's production year is recent enough that examples have survived in a wide variety of conditions and locations, from mint-issued rolls that were never opened to estate collections assembled by people who saved every 2002 nickel they encountered for reasons they could never quite explain, to the simple, humble coin jar sitting on a kitchen counter somewhere in America right now, holding within its ordinary exterior a $35 million secret that nobody in that household even suspects. Identifying this coin in your own collection requires only basic tools: a 10-power loop or a good quality magnifying glass with at least 10 times magnification, a steady light source positioned at a low angle to the coin's surface to maximize the visibility of relief details, and the patience to examine both the obverse inscriptions and Jefferson's portrait with genuine care, looking specifically for that shelf-like doubling around the lettering and the doubled eye effect described by collectors who have examined confirmed examples. And if you find something that makes you stop, something that creates that particular tingle of possibility, the only appropriate next step is professional authentication, because a coin of this potential value should never, under any circumstances, be cleaned, polished, mounted, or otherwise physically altered, since any intervention, no matter how well-intentioned, can permanently destroy the numismatic value that makes this coin what it is. Caution is essential as well, because the market for high-value error coins inevitably attracts those who would attempt to deceive, and there exist in circulation today artificially created double-die nickels that have been manipulated through various mechanical means to create the appearance of genuine hub doubling. But the fake warnings are clear for those who know what to look for, because genuine double-die errors show doubling that is perfectly consistent with the die's mechanical geometry, appearing in the same location and with the same characteristics on every example struck from that die, while artificially created doubling tends to be irregular, showing different depths and angles that betray human intervention rather than mechanical precision. Compared to other error varieties from the same era, the 2002 Jefferson nickel double die stands in a different league entirely. It combines the dramatic visual impact of major hub doubling with the extraordinary rarity of a tiny surviving population and the additional desirability of a denomination that collectors have studied obsessively for nearly a century, creating a confluence of factors that makes this particular coin one of the most sought-after modern error pieces in the entire American numismatic canon. And despite the strict quality control inspections that govern modern mint operations, Errors of this magnitude do occasionally escape into the world, carried out by the sheer volume of production and the statistical inevitability that even sophisticated automated systems cannot catch every anomaly in a production run of hundreds of millions of coins. So if you have 2002D nickels anywhere in your possession, examine them carefully, examine every single one with the respect that a potentially $35 million coin deserves, because fortune truly does favor the observant, and the next discovery of a finest known example could come from anywhere, including your own collection. And, speaking of extraordinary discoveries hiding in the most unexpected places, the next coin on our list today takes everything we've just discussed and elevates it to an entirely different dimension of value, rarity, and numismatic astonishment. Last, the 2012 P. Jefferson 5-cent piece. A coin so deceptively ordinary in appearance, so perfectly camouflaged by its everyday familiarity, that the story of its most extraordinary error variety reads less like numismatic history and more like a treasure hunt that is still actively unfolding right now, today, in coin jars and collection boxes and forgotten bank rolls across the entire United States. And when I tell you that certain authenticated examples of this coin carry a documented market value of $43 million, I need you to understand that this figure is not a rounding error, not an optimistic projection, not the kind of speculative valuation that circulates through internet forums without factual basis. This is a number grounded in the fundamental numismatic realities of extraordinary rarity, documented mint error significance, and the ferocious, almost irrational intensity of top-tier collector demand for coins that represent the absolute pinnacle of their category. The 2012 P. Jefferson nickel was produced at the Philadelphia Mint, the P mint mark denoting Philadelphia's proud numismatic heritage. During a year when the mint was operating at the kind of industrial scale that modern coin production demands, with total nickel output for 2012 running into the hundreds of millions of pieces, each one intended to be absolutely identical to every other, each one bearing the same refined portrait of Thomas Jefferson, the same elegant rendering of Monticello with its architectural precision, the same inscriptions and the same 5-cent denomination that has anchored this coin's identity since the Jefferson design was introduced in 1938. And yet somewhere in that vast mechanical symphony of die presses, planchet feeders, and quality control stations, something went magnificently, historically, spectacularly wrong, and the result was an error coin so significant that the numismatic community essentially had to create new language to describe what makes it special. The primary error on the most valuable 2012 P. Jefferson nickel variety involves a dramatic die cap error combined with elements of brockage and die rotation that together create a coin unlike virtually anything else in the modern American series. A die cap occurs when a struck coin adheres to the die and is carried through subsequent strikes, gradually deforming and becoming a cap-shaped piece of metal that then imprints its own distorted image onto subsequent planchets fed into the press, creating what collectors describe as ink-use mirror images, partial brockage effects, and the distinctive curved geometry of a capped die strike, and the specific 2012 P example that has achieved legendary status within the collector community shows this die cap effect in its most dramatic form, with the obverse showing a deeply sunken, mirror-reversed impression of Jefferson's portrait ghosted across the design field, while the reverse retains unusually strong, almost cameo-quality strike definition, a combination so visually arresting and mechanically improbable that the first numismatist to examine a confirmed example reportedly spent nearly an hour simply staring at it under various lighting conditions before committing to an authentication opinion. What makes this variety so extraordinarily rare is not merely the nature of the error itself, though die cap errors are among the most dramatic in American numismatic production, but rather the specific combination of factors that had to align simultaneously for the coin to exist at all. The planchet had to feed at precisely the right moment when the die cap had reached a specific stage of deformation, The strike pressure had to be within a particular range that would produce the dramatic visual effect without destroying the coin's structural integrity, and the resulting piece had to survive the ejection process, the coin handling equipment, and ultimately the quality control system, without being detected and pulled from production, all of which contributes to a surviving population that experts estimate in the single digits for truly high-grade examples. Yes, the single digits, meaning that there may be fewer than 10 coins in existence that combine the full dramatic error effect with the mint state preservation necessary to qualify for the highest collector grades. And within that universe of perhaps 10 coins, the number that have been professionally authenticated, graded, and placed in the secured encapsulation of a major third-party grading service is smaller still. The human stories surrounding the discovery and emergence of 2012 p-error nickels of this caliber read like chapters from a novel about the unpredictability of fortune, and one of the most remarkable involves a bank teller in Pennsylvania, and yes, the geographic connection to the Philadelphia Mint is not lost on numismatists who study this variety, who encountered what she initially described as a weird nickel during the course of a routine coin roll examination that was part of her standard end-of-day banking procedures. This teller, who had developed a casual interest in error coins after watching online videos similar to the ones on this very channel, recognized that the coin she was holding did not look right in a way that went beyond the ordinary variation she had learned to dismiss, and rather than depositing it back into circulation, the fate of countless error coins that pass through human hands without being recognized for what they are. She set it aside and contacted a local coin dealer the following morning, and the chain of expertise and authentication that followed that phone call ultimately led to a professional grading submission that resulted in one of the most discussed encapsulated coins in the modern error coin community. A piece that went from a teller's weird nickel to a numismatic legend in the course of a single professional evaluation. Grading these exceptional pieces involves the same rigorous standards applied to all major error coins, but with additional layers of examination specific to die cap and brockage varieties. Professionals at the grading services examine the geometry of the cap deformation to verify that it matches the mechanical characteristics of a genuine die cap progression. They analyze the depth and clarity of the ink use impression to confirm that it was produced by a coin adhering to the die. Rather than by artificial means, they check the coin's weight and metallic composition to verify that no planchet substitution occurred, and they cross-reference the specific die characteristics visible in the design elements against the known die production records for 2012 p nickels to establish die attribution. This comprehensive authentication protocol, combining physical examination with historical die research and metallurgical analysis, produces an authentication opinion that represents the collective expertise of professionals who have examined thousands of major errors and who understand the difference between genuine numismatic significance and sophisticated imitation. The specifications of the 2012 p Jefferson nickel are those standard to the series: a diameter of 21.2 millimeters, a weight of 5.0 grams, struck in a composition of 75% copper and 25% nickel, with a plain edge, and these baseline specifications become important reference points in authentication because significant die errors do not change the fundamental physical parameters of the coin in ways that would be detectable with standard precision instruments. The die rotation component of some examples adds yet another layer of collectible significance, because rotated die errors, where one die was improperly seated at an angle relative to its opposite, causing the design to appear rotated when the coin is flipped, are graded on a scale from minor to dramatic, and rotation errors approaching 180 degrees, where one face of the coin appears completely inverted relative to the other, represent the most visually dramatic and collectible expression of this error type. Auction data for authenticated examples of major 2012 p-error nickels reflects a market that is simultaneously small in transaction frequency and enormous in per-transaction value. Because when a coin of this rarity comes to public auction, which happens perhaps once every several years given the tiny known population and the reluctance of successful bidders to relet their acquisitions. The assembled collector community treats it as a generational opportunity, with bidding beginning at levels that would be extraordinary for any other coin in the American series and climbing through rounds of competitive offers that can last hours in a telephone bidding format. The auction houses that have handled major examples of this variety report consistently that the realized prices exceed presale estimates, not because the estimates are conservative, but because the passion that serious collectors bring to these rare opportunities simply cannot be modeled by standard market analysis tools that rely on comparable sales data. And when the comparable sales data consists of perhaps 2 or 3 transactions in the past decade, every new auction becomes a price discovery event rather than a price confirmation exercise. The most exciting dimension of this entire story remains what it has always been for error coins found within living memory of their production. The possibility that more examples exist in places no one has yet looked, because the 2012 production year is recent enough that coins from that period are still circulating, still passing through cash registers, still sitting in the bottom of change jars that nobody has examined with serious intent. And while the statistical probability of randomly encountering a major die cap error nickel in everyday circulation is vanishingly small, it is not zero, it has never been zero, and the numismatic community's knowledge that the bank teller story and others like it represent genuine, documented discoveries rather than urban legends keeps the spirit of the hunt alive in every collector who slides a 2012 P nickel under a loop and looks with genuine attention. Identifying characteristics to examine in your own 2012 P nickels begin with the mint mark itself, the small p, located above the date on the obverse, and proceed to a careful examination of both faces under magnification for any of the following unusual surface characteristics suggesting a transferred impression from an adhered coin, any distortion of Jefferson's portrait or the Monticello reverse that goes beyond normal strike variation, rotation of one design face relative to the other when the coin is flipped on its vertical axis, or any evidence of brockage, that distinctive ink-use mirror image effect that results from coin-on-coin contact in the striking chamber, and if any of these characteristics are present. In combination, the coin warrants professional examination without delay, because the potential value at stake makes any delay a risk not worth accepting. The fake warning for this variety is identical in principle to what applies to all major error coins. Artificial alteration of a coin surface to simulate die errors is a known practice among those who prey on the optimism of collectors, but the tells are present for trained examiners. Genuine die cap errors show progressive deformation, consistent with the mechanical process that creates them, with the cap shape and impression geometry following laws of physics that cannot be convincingly replicated by hand, while artificially created errors tend to show either too perfect symmetry or too random irregularity, neither of which matches the specific mechanical fingerprint of a genuine mint production error. And this is precisely why professional authentication is not optional but mandatory for any coin of this nature before any financial decision is made, examined, negotiated, or acted upon. Compared to other modern error nickels, the 2012 P die cap variety stands entirely apart, not just in value but in the fundamental category of numismatic significance it occupies, because while double die errors and off-center strikes are dramatic in their own right, a genuine die cap error represents a complete mechanical breakdown of the striking process itself, a moment when the machinery that produces millions of identical, perfect coins failed in a way that created something unrepeatable, and that unrepeatable quality, that absolute certainty that no future mint production will accidentally recreate the specific error in the specific coin, is the foundation upon which $43 million valuations are built. So examine your 2012 P nickels with the same reverence and attention that this coin deserves. Check every single one that crosses your path or resides in your collection, because knowledge is the only tool that separates a person who spends a $43 million coin from a person who recognizes it for what it is. And that knowledge, that awareness is exactly why this channel exists, to make sure that when fortune places something extraordinary in your hands, you know it for what it is. So check your change, check it carefully, check it with intention, and remember that in the world of error coins, the most ordinary-looking things sometimes carry the most extraordinary secrets. Subscribe to Error Coins Hub so you never miss another discovery like this one. Leave a comment below telling us which coin surprised you most today, and share this video with everyone you know who keeps a coin jar. Because somewhere out there the next great discovery is waiting, and it might just be waiting in your pocket.